Campbell Newman is the Queensland Premier and he joins us now from Brisbane. Mr Newman, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Michael. Thanks for having me.
The mining industry says Queensland now has the dubious honour of having the highest mining taxes in Australia. It's pretty handy work there from the state government.
Well, before I answer that question, and I will answer it, I just want to make one thing that hasn't happened in this budget, and that is that taxes haven't been increased on families. So Queenslanders waking up this morning have $7,000 tax off the family home. They've got a freeze on Tariff 11 electricity prices. They've got a freeze on family car registration. They're actually seeing a $15,000 first homeowners construction grant for property that's being built or is off the plan to get the construction sector going. And our schools across the state are seeing a huge boost in funding to do up the maintenance backlog issues. Now, in terms of the mining tax, well, let's just look at the facts. We're only putting royalties up after $100 a tonne. So a whole lot of thermal coal mines at the moment, which are struggling, I acknowledge that, with coal prices around $85, $90 a tonne, are not being touched at all by this. It's only after $100 a tonne that there's an increase of 2.5%, and there is a significant increase, I acknowledge, after $150 a tonne. So with lower coal mining prices, the royalties either are not there at all in terms of an increase, or the effect is muted. Now, the mining industry has had problems for some time. They've allowed their costs to get out of control. They've allowed basically poor industrial relations practices, poor management practices. The productivity has dropped. On the one hand, they've been happy to let that happen while prices were high, and now it's all coming home to roost. If there are going to be mines that are closing, well, that's not just about royalties, it's a lot to do with the performance of the companies themselves.
BHP Billiton and Xstrata say this increase in royalties will play a factor in any possible mine closures. You mentioned thermal coal there, Premier, but it, as you well know, is coking coal, which is the source of great demand from China. The spot price there has dropped about 20% or so in the last 3 months. Both the big miners are very concerned about the prospect, therefore, on mines already, as you say, existing under very high production costs. This could very well tip a lot of those struggling mines over the edge. Your increase, the Queensland government's increase in mining royalties.
Well, of course they would say that, and I note Mr Palmer's comments as well yesterday. I mean, a mining billionaire arguing against us, from a position of what you can only describe as vested interest. But again, look, Xstrata and BHP had already signalled that they were going to close operations. It was interesting, by the way, 24 hours prior to our budget, they actually made announcements about job losses anyway, before they knew what the government was doing. So you can come to your own conclusions about the way they're trying to game the whole thing. But I'll say this, there's also a quid pro quo on this. The government understands that they need certainty. We've made a commitment that we will not change royalties for 10 years. That's the sort of thing they've been crying out for years. The other thing is we've already demonstrated as a government that we are prepared to make sure that approvals occur in a very swift fashion, an efficient fashion, while protecting the environment in Queensland. And we're also making a major commitment to streamline the terrible red tape and bureaucracy they have in running their day-to-day operations that have been imposed by the previous Labor government. We're fair dinkum about sorting out that. We've already demonstrated that we're prepared to approve mining projects, and we are fair dinkum about working with them to cut the red tape in terms of their operations. So we will save them money. But in terms of their operations right now, they need to sort out their own house. I'd make one other point too. There is some good news there. We're hearing this morning that iron ore prices have bumped up by around 10%, perhaps a bit more. Iron ore requires coking coal as well to make steel, and let's hope that also sees some upward price pressure for them as well.
You mentioned the magic word hope there, Premier, because the budget forecasts the average coking coal price to be around $199 US this year. It's about $150 at the moment. It's a pretty heroic assumption given the depressed commodity prices at the moment. If that price isn't reached, that could throw your budget forecast well and truly out of whack.
Well, I'm happy to answer that. I think there is a difference between the spot prices that you might be referring to and longer-term contractual prices that are already locked in. And yes, I acknowledge that in the longer term that the prices, if the spot price stays down, that those actual realised prices will come down. But I do make
that could throw your revenue forecast well and truly out. That could disturb your revenue forecast.
Well, it's September now. We're already a number of months through the financial year, and I make the point that on the information we have, these large mining companies have locked in for periods of time those higher prices, and they will unwind and unravel, but I don't think it will be to the detriment of this budget. But look, this is a budget that is fair to everybody. It actually ensures that we deal with a huge financial problem left by Anna Bligh and Labor. We cannot keep borrowing money. We cannot keep asking people in their homes and businesses to put their hand in their pocket and just fork out all the time. And that's why we've taken the pressure off families by a whole range of concessions. Back on mining though, we've got Wayne Swan with a great big mining tax, and yet he didn't put any money in this year's federal budget for Queensland. He didn't do that. He didn't show where the money was going back to Queensland, his supposed home state. So once again, Wayne Swan has betrayed Queensland. And we said always that if we became the government, any product that was dug out of the soil of Queensland, well, the proceeds would be returned to the people of Queensland to build services and infrastructure in this state.
And just quickly before we leave mining, Premier, surely yours and the federal opposition's attacks on the federal government's mining tax are now well and truly blunted, because, as we saw yesterday, the Queensland government now has its own big increased mining tax.
Well, I just go back to what I said before, not at all. And if you go back to my comments during the campaign, I was always consistent. So was Tim Nicholls, the Treasurer. We said that our fundamental opposition to the mining tax was on the basis that Wayne Swan wanted to take the money and spread it around Australia and betraying his own state. We're saying any money that is raised in a tax sense from the riches from Queensland will go back to Queensland, and that's what we're doing and ensuring with this royalty regime that we're putting in place. That's what Queenslanders want to see. That's what we'll achieve, the money coming back to Queensland.
And finally, on the subject of families, Premier Newman, as a result of the budget, at least 14,000, possibly more families could now be dealing with the loss of one, if not more, wage earners as a result of the public service cuts. Can you guarantee there'll be no loss in frontline services as a result of those job cuts?
Well, let's be very clear. We're committed to building up frontline services, and for example in health we're putting $800 million a year extra into the health system, a 7% increase. And a lot of the screaming and yelling we're hearing from union leaders, who are also Labor Party leaders, is nonsense. Many nurses and doctors are in administrative positions. My guarantee is that frontline services will not only be maintained, they'll be built up. In terms of frontline jobs, there may be people who go from the front line, but changes in technology, efficiency and work practices will see us maintain or build the front line and the delivery for Queenslanders. That's what counts. You don't get gold medals, you don't get awards for wasting money. That's what the former government did in health. They wasted $1.2 billion on a health payroll system. That didn't heal one sick person. And I could give you many examples about the waste and inefficiency in the public sector that we have inherited.
Campbell Newman in Brisbane, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks very much, Michael.